Hi, it's Liz. Um, I've been really busy today, so I'm just kind of throwing something together real quick. I'm gonna probably put together a nicer video this weekend because I'll actually have plenty of time. Um, so stay tuned for that. Subscribe. Um, but yeah, I just kind of wanted to briefly start a series that I've been wanting to I want to start a series about a topic, a series of topics that I've been wanting to talk about for a while, and that is problems in rhetoric. Problems in rhetoric that I notice that people commonly have, common misunderstandings. And the background here is that I'm a math major, which, if you don't know, that means that I've spent countless hours doing like really long, rigorous logical proofs. And while I was in college getting my bachelor's, I was off social media, kind of as Facebook and social media as a whole seemed to come into its prime. Like I just kind of missed that, and I was doing math and writing, just pages upon pages for years of this dense logical proofs of stuff. So this really affected the way that I saw things when I got back on Facebook and started to see the extent to which people were using it to host debates and seeing how those debates went and engaging in them. Um, it was very shocking, especially after, coming from an environment you know, where everybody had at least some fluency in talking about logic, with some rigor. And so if somebody made a mistake, everybody had the language necessary to correct that mistake, to understand that mistake, to like have what's the word? A constructive discussion about about it. And that's not really true in the general populace, unfortunately, because the whole way that we do education is so backwards. Even if you're really into math, you're not going to be doing a lot of serious proofs until you get to your junior year of college, even though logic is the entire basis of mathematics. You'd think that we would talk about at least some basic logical theory when we could talk about that in elementary school if we wanted to, but we're not really trying to teach people to think critically, so we don't. Anyway, yeah, so I've just been observing this, and there are just certain specific misconceptions that keep coming up that I notice people have, and I wanted some space to talk about. Um, I feel like it would be a lot better to use visuals to talk about this kind of thing, but I just haven't the time and energy to put something like that together. So it's going to be what it's going to be. So the topic for today, I don't have a good name for it. It's a confusion about implication, about logical implication. Now, before we get started, I want to define what a logical implication is, because in everyday speech, saying that you are implying something is more or less the same as saying you're suggesting something. It's like you're being indirect. You're just sort of implying it. That's not what it means logically. Logically, if a statement A implies another statement, B, that means if A is true, then B must be true. A implies B. And you see, that's kind of like the core of any argument. If somebody's making an argument for B, they're going to have some premise A, and they're going to at least try to argue that A proves that B is true. So this is like the very most basic model of an argument. And of course, many arguments, the structure of them is quite complex, but you can kind of still boil it down to A implies B at the end of the day if you know how. So, yeah, A implies B. So the specific misconception that I've noticed that I wanted to talk about is this idea that, okay, say that my friend says to me, A implies B. They're making an argument to me, A implies B. And I say, I don't think A does imply B though. Like, I don't think that works. And they'll say, but how can you say that B isn't true? B is true. What's wrong with you? Obviously B is true. And then I say, well, I didn't say that B isn't true. I just said that A doesn't imply B. And they're like, well, that's the same thing. I've seen so many versions of this argument. I've been in a few. I actually kind of had a pretty bad fight with an old friend of mine that helped to culminate the end of our friendship because of that exact problem, which I'll tell you a little bit about as an example. But it's frustrating because there are reasons why, even if you do agree with B, the conclusion of the argument, that you would want to criticize the argument itself, the implication. You might even agree with the premise. You might agree with the premise and the conclusion. You just don't agree that the premise causes the conclusion to be true. And that is important. Because say we're talking about a political issue. We're talking about this issue of B. We think it's really important to convince people that B is true. If you're using a bad argument to do that, that's probably not a good thing for your movement, right? You don't want to be using bad arguments or arguments that, because they can easily be used against you, for one thing. And probably you don't want to be encouraging people to think in ways that are fallacious, that don't make sense. Probably. And maybe you're just like me and you like nitpicking arguments. But at any rate, there is an important distinction. So I don't even know how to explain it in more detail than this, but I'm going to try. So, well, let's just dig into the example. I think that'll help. Excuse me. So this was when there had just been that big email dump, that big DNC email dump from WikiLeaks. And basically, me and a friend of mine who's a lawyer and this former friend of mine were talking about them. I'm talking about what was actually in these emails. And let's just call my former friend Ted. So Ted felt was trying to argue that there was convincing, not just convincing, but like legally damning evidence in those emails that members of the DNC had been engaged in illegal corruption. So that's a very specific claim. It's not just the idea that these people are, whatever, corrupt, but the idea that specifically there is proof, like legal, like strong legal evidence at the very least, in these emails of that corruption. And while my friend, my lawyer friend, and I certainly don't assume that high-level politicians of any stripe are not corrupt. I mean, I basically think I'm sure they are. I'm sure they're breaking laws. We were both coming from the position that there wasn't really any damning evidence in there. There was at best a few suggestive turns of phrase. And I had read all of the emails that were supposedly the most damning, and I really wasn't seeing it. It just seemed like confirmation bias on the part of, the sort of frothing at the mouth anti-Hillary people. So he made the following argument. He made the argument that because DNC officials were scrambling to get ahead of the scandal, that proved that there was damning evidence in the leaked emails. And I said, no, that doesn't prove there's evidence in there. That doesn't even prove that the emails are authentic. So what I'm saying is that even if the emails were faked, of course they would still be scrambling to get on top of a scandal, because the issue that they're trying to save face. They're trying to save the appearance of there being something damning in there, whether or not there is kind of irrelevant to whether or not they're going to launch a PR campaign. Because obviously, this is what people do. I mean, anything that's potentially embarrassing, it really doesn't matter whether it's true or not. They're going to launch a PR campaign. So he jumped on that and he said, are you saying the emails aren't authentic? Of course they're authentic. Nobody's saying they're not authentic. How could you say that they're not authentic? Now, maybe you can see where the error he made is. I think most people can. I think this is a particularly stupid mistake. What was funny was that he was so resistant to, I had to break it down into very, very simple terms before he actually understood the mistake in what he was saying. But I'm just gonna have faith that you, the viewer, can tease that out, because I don't really want to do that again. And please do not comment to me about those emails. I'm like so beyond sick of arguing about them. You can think whatever you want, and I'm really fine with it. But the key thing here is that when I said A doesn't imply B, it doesn't even imply C, I wasn't making a statement about the truth of any of those statements, A, B, or C. I was making a statement about their relationship, and I was saying there was not an implication between them, that A does not cause B or C to be true. So specifically, in context, I'm saying that a PR campaign does not prove that the evidence is damning. or that the emails are true or false. It doesn't prove anything about those issues. All it proves is that they're concerned about saving face, that they're concerned about public opinion. That's it. That's the end of the relationship. There is no relationship. So, with that, I'll leave you. Please, if you're going to comment, I'm only going to talk to you about the logical issues. I'm not going to talk to you about those goddamn emails. Ugh.